Tonight, on assignment, the future of nuclear power in Quebec.
How many people have to be sick before you get to understand that it has to be closed?
Is it time to pull the plug? Good evening, I'm Bill Hoagland. Welcome to CFCF News on assignment. Gentilly 2 is Quebec's only nuclear power plant. In operation since 1983, the plant has been shrouded in mystery. Now the future of Gentilly 2 is about to be decided, and some people say keeping it going is a risk not worth taking. Here now is Todd Vanderhayden.
Diane Lanouette is a retired artist. Her family has lived in Champlain, Quebec for generations.
Water, fields, brooks, ducks and white geese, and it's like a paradise, except this.
What Diane is talking about is the Gentilly 2 nuclear power plant across the river from her home. Diane lost much of her intestines to cancer a few years ago, and she believes her illness was caused by the plant.
We think that there is a possible risk. Many persons in Champlain know a neighbor who has a cancer. We think that there is a lot of cancer.
She and a few other local residents are part of a small group, Zero Nucléaire, that's been fighting to close the plant for years. So far, they've been powerless against what they call powerful interests. They say that's because Gentilly 2 is part of an industry that's remote and mysterious.
I feel it very secret, very secret.
Marcel Jeté has been fighting his battle for 8 years. He has incurable cancer of the lymph nodes. He worked inside Gentilly as a welder on contract between 1969 and 1995, and he says Hydro-Quebec downplayed the risks.
La cause principale de mon cancer.
My cancer was caused by radiation from the plant, he says. Marcel also says he knows of at least 30 former workers who have cancer too, but he says most took cash settlements from Hydro and subcontractors, something he refuses to do. There were others who accepted, he says, but they can't talk about it because that was part of the deal.
This is so scary. This is so scary. Scary enough to move.
Céline Germain has thyroid cancer. She had multiple tumors in her neck. She's now selling her house to get away from the plant.
It's very obvious that nothing is fine. I mean, why would I want to move from one of the nicest places where I've been? It would be, except for the plant. I mean, I'm losing money, I'm losing my job, I'm losing everything.
Céline showed us her cat, born with a genetic deformity, and she's convinced that Gentilly is to blame.
How many people have to be sick before you get to understand that it has to be closed?
The plant is now at a crossroads. Hydro-Quebec wants to spend $1.2 billion to upgrade it. It needs a green light from the provincial government, and a decision will come in the next few months.
They closed the whole thing down.
But critics say now is the time to end Quebec's nuclear experiment. Gordon Edwards is an anti-nuclear activist.
It would be the best thing to just back out of this technology and say, we don't want to be in this anymore. It was a mistake. We shouldn't have got into it in the first place.
Gentilly 2 is the province's only nuclear plant. It's managed to stay off the radar screen most of its life. Many people don't even know it exists. And it is an oddity. It's never actually generated much power, just a tiny 3%. But it is generating controversy. Concerned residents have one simple question: why take the risk?
3% of electricity? No, it doesn't make sense.
For answers, we went to Michel Rayaume, a nuclear physicist by training and spokesman for the Gentilly plant.
It's not possible to have a relation between the cancer and the radiation.
Hydro-Quebec has long denied its nuclear plant is a danger to people's health. In the case of Marcel Jeté, for example, Hydro says it's just a coincidence.
I'm very sad for Marcel Jeté because he's sick.
So you don't believe him?
I don't believe him.
There's no risk?
No, there is a risk, of course, because life is a risk, but the risk is minimal.
Hydro-Quebec says it has these studies to prove that there's no risk. But how reliable are they?
we spoke to some leading independent researchers about the link between cancer and nuclear power plants. And they told us there are no scientifically conclusive studies out there either way. And so they said nobody should be making the claim that there's no risk or that the risk is minimal. John Bennett is an environmentalist with the Sierra Club of Canada.
Trying to link the fact that you live next to a nuclear power plant and you had a cancer, because cancers take 20 or 30 years to develop, the causal link is really difficult to prove.
And he says with no clear answers.
And don't take the risk if you don't have to. And we certainly don't have to in Canada generate electricity with atomic weapons. And that's what we're doing.
What do you think the possible risks are from that plant?
I think they're very real. I mean, the risk, I sell my house for it. This is the last thing I want to do. If the risk wouldn't be so high, I would never ever sell the house.
Coming up next, the other risks of having a nuclear power plant, one that's strategically located.
An attack on the Gentil reactor would probably disable the entire seaway.
What would happen in case of a disaster? Refurbishing the Gentil 2 nuclear power plant would cost more than $1 billion. But since the plant only generates 3% of all of Quebec's electricity, some say that's too high a price, especially given the health and security risks involved. Here again is Todd Vanderheyden.
The St. Lawrence River is critical to the North American economy. The Gentil 2 nuclear plant sits on its shores, a strategic location. On 2 occasions since 9/11, media have flown over Gentil without ever being stopped.
It's a very easy target. From the air, you can see it very, very plainly.
Activist Gordon Edwards warns tons of radioactive nuclear waste are stored on site.
If you wanted to do something to cripple the St. Lawrence Seaway, the only target that I can think of that would be able to do that would be the Gentil nuclear reactor because of the radioactive poisons in it. An attack on the Gentil reactor would probably disable the entire seaway.
And then there's the hazardous plutonium produced and stored at Gentil, which could be used to make atomic bombs. Remember, this waste will have to be stored and guarded for thousands of years.
There is a plutonium in there, but it's going to be very safe.
Hydro-Quebec says everything is under control, insisting the plant is safe. But we investigated its record. We found there was a serious incident in September of 1995 called a Class 4 event, a power failure to the plant. There was a rapid core power increase. While emergency safety protocols shut down the station immediately, the simulations had been wrong. We found other incidents as well, more than a dozen in total, due to human error, sloppiness, and complacency by plant workers. In case of a disaster, every resident within 8 kilometers has been given iodine pills against radiation. But is that enough?
If the government is ready to give you some pills, good Lord, how scary can it be?
There is no plan of evacuation. Suppose we have to leave, we don't know. All I know is take your pills and wait.
As it turns out, just 3% of Quebec's energy, Gentil 2 is also aging prematurely. Supposed to last until 2013, there have already been chlorine leaks, hydrogen leaks, cracked pipe welds, and blocked filters. Hydro never predicted it would age this quickly, which raises the question, what else wasn't predicted?
That reactor is falling apart, and they want to spend $1 billion to fix it up. Why?
Consider the economics. 2 years ago, the estimate for rebuilding the plant was $850 million. It's now at $1.2 billion.
The project is $1.2 billion.
$1.2 billion.
$1.2 billion, yes.
But we found this American study done for Hydro, which estimated the cost at $2.3 billion. And some critics say it could even be $3 billion.
It's very difficult, very expensive. No one's ever actually done it on time or on budget.
Hydro insists the plant is also an economic powerhouse for a depressed region.
We have the spin-off about $100 million a year in the area of Trois-Rivières. We have 700 employees, permanent employees.
And the utility claims that a majority of people support the plant.
Is that true?
It's not true at all, at all. Not in here in Champlain, though. No, 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 no. This is lie. This is lying.
Diane Lanouette says that many people are afraid to speak out.
Every person around knows people who are scared, but they're afraid to talk because many work there.
There's another reason for keeping the plant going that has nothing to do with economics.
Just the power of the atom and the fact that it is connected with the atomic bomb, it puts you into councils and meetings and makes you a more important political entity than if you had no nuclear power.
This is a very important asset for Hydro-Quebec.
You want to stay in the nuclear game.
Yeah.
The nuclear industry is notoriously secretive.
Do you think people are being kept in the dark?
Of course, and they want to be kept in the dark. They don't want to realize, you don't want to move.
So who exactly is watching over this industry? Well, there is an agency that's supposed to do that. The Canadian Nuclear Safety Commission. Ken Lafreniere is the CNSC's director in charge of Gentilly 2.
We are the industry watchdog. We're an independent body.
We asked the CNSC about the risks at Gentilly.
We take the health and safety of our public very seriously, and we look at all the information.
Do you think that's what they do? Do they put nuclear safety first?
I think the nuclear safety they're referring to is the safety of the industry.
Critics say the CNSC is too close to the industry it's supposed to be monitoring, and that it doesn't take a leadership role.
It doesn't have enough teeth, and it doesn't have enough independence.
We are totally independent. We make decisions based on the interest of the public and government of Canada.
Could you ask for a safety study to be done of the people?
If required, the Commission has that power.
But the agency has never done any studies of its own on health risks at Gentilly. It says that is not its mandate.
So what is your mandate exactly, just so I understand it?
Our mandate, the Commission's mandate, is protect the health and safety of Canadians.
Since 2002, the CNSC does issue report cards for Canada's 7 nuclear plants. But again, there are questions as to how effective those report cards really are. For instance, on every report card Gentilly has been issued, it's received a C grade for both performance assurance and radiation protection.
So is a C acceptable?
A C meets our minimum standards.
And yet by the CNSC's own rating system, a C grade means below requirements. So which one is it? Acceptable or below requirements?
Les différentes sortes de radiation on peut recevoir.
It's a lack of radiation protection that Marcel Jeté blames for his illness, and he warns other workers are still at risk.
Il y a des travailleurs encore qui vont être exposés.
Workers will be exposed, he says, without realizing what the real risks are. It's unacceptable.
Ça, c'est déplorable.
At 68, with incurable cancer, he's under no illusions. He says a few people up against Hydro-Quebec and the nuclear industry is a David and Goliath battle. Close it as soon as possible, he says, because it's a risk.
Il y a pas de danger.
Yet closing Gentilly is not in Hydro's plans. It intends to rebuild and keep the plant running until 2035. If you're wondering what the Quebec government's position is on this story, so are we. The Charest Liberals came to power saying they were not in favor of nuclear energy development. And yet we spent a month trying to set up an interview with Thomas Mulcair, Quebec's environment minister. We were told he was unavailable. Now, politics may be playing a role. The Liberals barely won the Trois-Rivières riding during the last election, and so closing down the Gentilly 2 plant could have a negative effect next time around. Diane Lanouette worries she and others will lose their fight against Hydro and the government.
They're powerful. That's what scares me. They're powerful, and I don't trust the government.
While questions remain about the economics of the plant and whether it's a security risk, one thing is clear. For now, it's impossible to prove a direct link between Gentilly and cancer. Still, Céline Germain has made up her mind. She's moving.
It's just because I knew that I cannot stay.
I wish it didn't exist. I wish I had the news today that they would close the plant for good. I would stay here for the rest of my life.
If Quebec does decide to keep the Gentilly 2 plant going, it will need a bigger site for the nuclear waste it produces. The issue is now before the Quebec cabinet.